So we're now recording, and I'm just going to open it up to attendees. So attendees are starting to come through, Steve.
Lovely.
I'll wait a couple of minutes just for a couple more people to come in, and then we'll start. That seems to evened out. Hi everyone, my name's Lewis from Kusu. I'm proud to introduce you to Steve Baker, who is the founder and director of Good Company, and they are doing a session on happiness and resilience. There's going to be a lot of interactivity in there, so it sounds like quite a good session that Steve's putting on. Just so you know, for different features, if you have any questions for Steve throughout the talk, if you can use the Q&A function, so it's just a bit easier to make sure that they get answered at the end. And any discussions or comments, if you can use the chat function for that. And I will pass you over to Steve. So over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Lewis. Hello, everyone. As you just heard, I'm Steve, Good Company. I've just a tiny bit about me. I've worked in the SU sector from sort of 2000 until last year when I decided to set up Good Company. And today we're going to be looking at happiness and resilience and their relationship. And if I just click onto my agenda. So why is happiness so important? We'll be looking at what brings you your own individual happiness. So we'll be doing a couple of exercises where, oh my God, can you hear that? I hope not. A couple of exercises where you'll need something to write with. Then we'll be moving on to how you can avoid distractions and why that's so important, and then linking it all up with how you take all of that stuff and build more resilience into your life day to day, responding more effectively in a much more a smooth way rather than things affecting you so much. So let's crack straight on. So why is happiness important? So this talk is all supported by scientific research around the different areas of happiness and its impact. But what I thought I would start with something a little bit more philosophical, and that is that this is what Aristotle said about happiness. It's the meaning and purpose of life and the whole aim to the end of human existence. So from a philosophical perspective, there's certainly some pretty heavyweights in there. But what does the science say? So this study back in 2001 showed that when somebody is asked enough questions, it actually, at the end of all of those things, what they found was that ultimately their question is so they can be happy. And so that's partly why I think it's so important, is that when you really think about things, ultimately it comes down to making yourself happy. So whether that's at home or at work, that's the start of it. But in terms of direct proven benefits of happiness, you can see here that it can improve your heart health. It gives you the ability to combat stress more effectively, a stronger immune system. A healthier lifestyle can physically reduce pain and even increase the length of your life. Chatting to Lewis, I mean, I've got the supporting links to all this stuff, so if you would like some of that after, then just obviously let me know. But there's also the additional benefits, additional research, which is how it affects people at work. And so once again, these things are proven. So it increases your decision making and your creativity. It makes you it helps with team productivity and individual productivity. It shows that it helps people relate better to their customers and gives better customer service. And there's also some research to show that happier people actually earn more money. So there really might well be a lot more in it for you, apart from the fact that you're happier. So where do we start in terms of what we're going to do? So a guy called Paul Dolan, who is a researcher, a lecturer at LSE, talks about the pleasure and purpose principle. And what he's found is that if you can define these things for yourself, and then when you switch tasks, you actually switch from pleasure to purpose, those people that can do that actually are happier. And so, in terms of what we're going to do, we are going to go through some of some questions, which are once again, they're questions that help you understand your own happiness, but also they are once again supported. The things that I'm asking you questions about are supported by the science. That people that do these things more often are happier. And then we'll be looking at your purpose, and there's some questions. So we'll just crack straight into that actually. So if you want to grab a pen and paper, and I will leave you to just for a couple of minutes, and I'll put the music up a little louder. But I'll perhaps just talk through it a little bit as you do it. But if you just want to start answering these questions for yourself. So music, if you listen to music, it's once again, it's shown to make you happier. So making it conscious and attending to it as an activity is actually is where the power is. So rather than passively listening to these things or passively going around kind of choosing what you want to do, if you've actually kind of detailed what it is that you really like, I mean, we probably all have playlists that from time to time we go to, but on the other hand, you know, you can use it strategically to bring yourself happiness. So if you just like to crack on through those questions. And once again, so enjoying what you eat consciously as well can increase your happiness, that's for sure. Exercise, as you know, there's some very well documented evidence to show that exercising brings you greater happiness. What things and hobbies do you really like to do? Artistic activities are also really important because not only do they bring you more happiness, but they also bring creativity, that sort of left side of your brain getting engaged. And most importantly, what's also been shown is that when you do these things, any of these things, with people that you want to spend time with, the fact that you're with those people also increases your happiness. So you can see there's quite a list there. So I'm just going to let you, for another, say, 2 minutes, I will let you just scribble those down, because it's important that you, as we go through this session, it's important that you get this list written for yourself. And I'm just going to click that there. I really apologise about that alarm, and there's not a lot I can do about it. I apologise, but it's off now, so. So you may well have got through a few of those things, but because this is being recorded, obviously you'll be able to come back and pause and actually go through this in some more detail. So hopefully you've got a list of things going on there, and what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next short exercise, which is linked to this one, which is to do with your purpose. And so, once again, this may be slightly more difficult to answer. However, like I said, you can come back to these questions. And these might be, like I say, a little bit more reflective. So, as you can see, what do you think the world needs? A big question that you may need to ask yourself. A great one is, what did you used to like to do as a child that you no longer do? To give you a guide in terms of where you might like to focus your attention now. Another area here is the sort of question which is, if you had infinite money and infinite time, what would you do? And see where your thoughts come from. And my favorite is how you like to help other people. So if you're already doing volunteering things, or if things just show up in your world and that's how you help others, pay attention to those. And once again, so just build that into your purpose. And I'll leave you for just a couple of minutes whilst you just think about that. And once again, this session today is for you to start this work, and if you then come back to it later with these questions, you can take time and actually start to pad out this list of purpose. So like I say, I'll leave it for just a couple of minutes. Hopefully the music you can hear there whilst you're focusing on what you're writing. Hopefully you're kind of getting there with those questions now. Like I say, these are some pretty big questions. If you do want to write in the chat how you're getting on with that, just so I know if you're ready to move on or not. But like I say, you can pause and come back. I'm happy to take a question actually there, Lewis, if that's good.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Feel free.
How do I?
So if anyone wants to submit any questions in the Q&A, and then I can just read them out to Steve as they come through. Kate Smith has apologised, said slightly late. Would you mind flipping to an earlier slide? That's up to you, Steve. I would say, Kate, that the session's being recorded so you can watch it all back fully later on as well. We do have an anonymous question, Steve, which is, hi, I hope you are well. I was wondering if you could have the PowerPoint presentation, as it is brilliant, makes you think into a deeper meaning.
Oh yeah, I can see that. So of course, yeah. I think it's actually in a Prezi, so I will see if I can package it um, and send it out via the links. If that's all right, Lewis, we can do that.
Yeah, if you provide the link, I can pass it out as a handout for this session as people replay it.
Okay, brilliant. So I probably won't go back to the slides, but like I said, you will be able to watch it and essentially on the replay. Okay, so hopefully at this point you brilliant. So hopefully at this point you've started to get your list together. But what comes next? So it focuses on your attention, and essentially it's also been shown that those that attend to things rather than being distracted are once again happier. So, and it's all about this sweet spot of attention, which relates directly to the pleasure and the purpose principle. So, if you can imagine that you love eating pizza, and you eat a pizza, but then you eat another pizza and another pizza, and you just eat another and another pizza. At some point, the enjoyment of the last pizza you ate is going to be significantly less than the first pizza that you ate. And so it's an awareness of where that sweet spot is and how far away from the happiness that you're getting from repeating or doing the same thing. So in terms of linking that back to your pleasure and purpose, you might find pleasure in, say, watching some Netflix, but if you're doing that all day, then you want to flip that back to doing some purpose. And so in terms of purpose, that could be your big purpose, but I'd also like to point out that purpose can also be purposeful. So purposeful things that produce an outcome, a lot of those things can be relatively menial tasks, like cleaning your house or just generally day-to-day tasks in your job, which are administrational. They also have a purpose. They're achieving some kind of outcome. So be aware that when you're kind of flipping between pleasure and purpose, just pay attention to this diminishing return that you're getting from the activity that you're undertaking. And in terms of a day-to-day, the idea is that you've created a lot of those things that you like to do. Some of those things don't take very long. Listening to a couple of your favorite tunes is actually 6 or 7 minutes. You can do that in between two meetings, which are very purposeful, which will actually increase your happiness in that environment. And I should also, so when I say increase your happiness, I'm linking that directly to the benefits I've explained. So for instance, you're not just increasing your happiness to be happy, you're increasing your happiness for all of those benefits. So increased resilience is obviously one of those things. Stress, health, longevity, money, productivity, creativity, right? So all of those things are linked to happiness. For me, it's just a really tidy umbrella to say, go and find that thing that brings you pleasure. But it's important for you to realize that this isn't just some arbitrary thing where you're going off and being happy. You're maintaining your resilience and your well-being by transitioning from purpose, so let's say that's your job, to pleasure, which is something in between. And so one of the common things that people say in sort of mental health is, go for a walk or take a break or walk away. Now, to me, what I do in this this training is show you that actually if you go away and do something which gives you pleasure, that increases your happiness, which actually makes those things enable your resilience to grow significantly. So just be aware where your sweet spot is. So if you're if you're feeling either way, that you're feeling that diminished return, and I suggest that starts to come if you were say doing something in a pleasurable state, you're going to start to feel bored. But if you're doing something in a workspace, you might feel bored, but you also might feel anxious and stressed. So those things are triggers for you to realize that you need to switch to the other side. And I hope that makes sense to you. But it's also important to avoid distraction. So attending to one thing at a time, once again, has been proven to improve your well-being and your happiness. And so some sad news for those of you there that are multitaskers, because multitasking has been proven to actually reduce happiness. There was a study in Holland which had 3 groups of students. The first group was asked to do Sudoku experiments, and they were asked to do them in a linear fashion. The second were asked to do it how they liked, and the third was asked to specifically they were forced to not do it that way. Sorry, I'm losing track on my notes, but they were forced not to. And then what it was shown was the students that were focused in a linear fashion, that had to go through those puzzles one by one, ultimately not only were they more successful, but they were also happier. And so avoiding distractions is very important because it hones your attention. Now, once again, this is just a mini task. And just for a few seconds, I'd like you to write down a few things that distract you, so that you're bringing awareness to yourself, and what actually in your particular environment might be distracting you. So if you want to chuck any in the comments, then that might be helpful for people. And I'll pick that question up at the end. Okay, so I'm gonna hazard a small guess and say that usually one of the things on this list is going to be your phone or email or modern day tech in some way, whatever app you're using, whatever notification you're getting, because our lives are just by and large ruled by that stuff now, because it's impossible to get away from. And so as a small suggestion, give yourself breaks from that. And there is the kind of the intensity of it all, and depending on what you're looking at in there, it can be quite disturbing on some levels, and confusing and annoying and frustrating. There is stuff out there that doesn't do that, which is obviously a good thing for you to pay attention to as well. But on a scientific level, it's distracting. So if it's so for instance, if you're in a meeting once again and someone's got a phone, you've got your phone there on the table, and off goes some message, then obviously the switching cost, which is your attentional cost, it's called your switching cost, is essentially used. And we all have a finite amount of switching costs until we're basically out of our ability to keep changing. So if you want to be more focused, but also, and this is interesting, happier, then actually take that out of your attention and turn it off, put it away. It's not about I mean, in lots of respects, you know, some people find it quite rude if people are in a meeting, but it's further than that. It's actually damaging to yourself. So there's a really good reason to take tech or breaks from tech quite often, because it can be very distracting. And I appreciate that obviously in lockdown, we're all very much tuned in to tech very much more. All the more reason for you to be conscious about the things that you really like to do to bring you pleasure and purpose, and focus on them at the time. When you're doing those, put your phone away. Okay, so let's be moving on.
Steve,
Yes.
I was just going to quickly say at this point, someone has submitted the 3 that they get distracted by, if you wanted me to read those out.
Yeah, actually I can see that. I've noticed that I've pressed the button. So, okay, distracted by thoughts and environment and negative energy. Okay, interesting. So what I would say is environment is probably the easiest one of those to talk about. You know, you control your environment. And so for instance, in terms of habit building behaviors, actually, if you were to want to go for a run, what it shows is if you prepare your equipment and your kit prior to, say, the day before, or when you get up in the morning, you put it on and you change your environment, you're more likely to do it. So if you could build a habit in this space that your environment is free of distraction, so you turn your phone off, you shut the door, you even tell people that you're uninterruptible for a certain time, then that will remove distraction. And then if you get to do something for purpose or for pleasure, then you're going to be able to focus and attend to it more. I think that there's another, yeah, obviously the other two that you mentioned there are really to do with your thoughts. And in the same way, thoughts are very distracting. Um, and so in the context that we're talking here, and obviously I don't know the context of what you're saying very much, but there is, so for instance, you will also have other thoughts which are the other side, thoughts that bring you pleasure or thoughts that have purpose in this context. Okay, this is quite a sensitive area, I understand. And I know it may sound flippant to say, oh, just do that, because obviously it doesn't necessarily feel that easy. But there is a particularly some research as well, which is the thing where you put a pencil in your mouth that makes you smile. So if you want to feel happier, then you just, smile. That action of smiling, it's a pleasurable thing, brings you happiness. And it's the same partially with your thoughts. This can be a little bit tricky for people because often people perceive their thoughts as something which are uncontrollable, which will and does take practice. And if you want any help with that, actually, I'm willing, email me and we can have an actual discussion so I can get some context. I would offer that to you if that's where you're at. Let me have a quick look down those questions. Yeah, so I'll answer that. Oh no, I've done that one. Merging stuff. Merging stuff is fantastic. Essentially, what you're doing there is you're finding a very useful exercise that's like an omni exercise. So whichever way round, it's a very useful thing to do, and you're going to gain both things from that. I mean, to be honest, if you were looking for purpose in your life, your whole life, this is exactly the sort of thing you should be looking for. So a question in terms of your purpose, if it can be purposeful and pleasurable, then clearly that's something you're going to want to do a lot more. And if you have things like that, I'd say think about that very seriously in terms of how could you make that into a bigger part of your life? How could that become, so for instance, you see this for sports people or musicians, clearly they love music, but it's also purposeful and productive for them. And those people are very creative people, and quite often are the people that are actually breaking boundaries in terms of resilience, happiness, and well-being. So hopefully I've answered that. Negative stuff. Okay. Well, I think I've covered and that social media and yeah. So with social media, I've kind of gone over that. Schedule times when you're not connected to it. Time management is let me think. I'll probably come back to that one maybe at the end because I need to move on a little bit to make sure we don't overrun. So I'm going to just click that away. So right, what you get distracted on, let me get back on track. So this exercise here is to illustrate to you how you can put some of that all together and this will help with time management as well. You can put all this together to start to actually look at where you are now, but then also you can start to look at where you want to be. And so what I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm just going to ask you to look at yesterday, okay? And I want you to just relatively rudimentarily, because obviously you can go back to this in more detail, but I want you to just to scan over yesterday and see and plan the times, what activity, who you did it with, and then give it a mark of pleasure or purpose out of 1 to 10. And so just run through that very briefly. And this is to give you an example of how this isn't as always as obvious as you might think. And also it gives you a good reflection on how you are consciously doing this sort of stuff. You know, are you putting happiness into your life or not? How much pleasure or purpose are you bringing into your life on a daily basis? And the reason why I asked you to do it yesterday is because that's how you were living normally. That's a normal way to be. That's your normal way to be. And it's good for you to have a look at that to see where your starting point might be. So, like I say, for the next, say, a couple of minutes, I'll let you go through this. And once again, since I've got the hang of the chat thing now, if you want to ask any questions, and I'll read through the other questions, but if you want to read some, put the questions in the chat and I will see if I can answer them for you. So the first thing to do is look to yesterday and start to scan through and see where you're at.
Steve, just to help you keep track of the Q&A stuff, once you've clicked answered live, you can click done, so then it clears off, so you know that that one's been answered.
Is a really good question from Christina. Whilst you're still filling in this worksheet, I'll give you my opinion. So what she says is that when you're working in the team and there's other people that have priorities which are not yours, then essentially you can be distracted by that. And if the team is under resourced, then it's very difficult because that distraction in work kind of affects your personal life, and it can be quite stressful. So if we kind of look at the principle that I'm talking about, okay, so this idea of going from pleasure to purpose, that is arbitrary. Okay, so if in your day to day you've got all this stuff going on, if you're inserting, so let's broadly call that purpose, not necessarily great because it's causing you some stress, but it's still in that ballpark. Okay, now in between those activities, if you then consciously go and focus on pleasurable activities, now some of these might be small things, but if you do them consciously, I mean, one of the things I used to do when so in my intro, I mean, I was I worked through student unions from like a coordinator level to chief exec, and so you can imagine the stress grew exponentially. But what I would do is even small things like just walking, just going for a 5-minute walk, or having a chat with a colleague over a cup of tea. Those things, if done consciously, will, and also quite importantly, they need to be in the ball. So it's not that you would go and talk to somebody about your negative issues, and I know that sounds, you might want to do that another time, but in these times when it's feeling most pressurized, it's actually important that you actually divert to something pleasurable and consciously do it. So, you know, it might be that you take a break and have something you really like to eat consciously. So what you're doing is you're sort of essentially you're replenishing your energy in that respect, or your happiness in that respect, to then be able to focus. And the reason why I mention this in this way, I mean, this isn't the only thing you can do, by the way, but the reason why I mention it in this way is because if you can consciously keep switching from side to side, over time, what happens is when you return back to those things, you'll find that, like I said in the intro, you're more productive. And that higher productivity actually means you can do more work. I know it sounds, it sounds like something a chief exec would say, but it's actually scientifically shown to be true that, you know, once you're happier, you're more productive. And if you're more productive, essentially you get more done. So what I would suggest is that even though it may feel like because what it's going to feel like is that you're wasting time, right? It's going to feel like, oh, how can I possibly go and just spend some time doing something pleasurable for myself when actually there's all this work to do, right? And if that's a prevalent thought, it's counterintuitive because you're going to be less productive and ultimately you're going to cause yourself more stress. If you can switch to something that doesn't take up all the time or as much time as you've got or much time as you can make, in between those tasks, you're going to be more productive and happier, and ultimately that will lead you to greater resilience and greater happiness. And in terms of this task that you guys are doing at the moment, which I'll have to get back to in a sec, we're reviewing your current day, right? So I'm just going to ponder, and I wonder if anyone's brave enough to put in the chat, like, you know, some of the things that they've got in there. But whilst you're doing that, I'd just like to explain to you what to do next, and that is that I want you to take the exact same chart, and I want you to look forward to tomorrow. Okay, so some of the stuff that you have from tomorrow you may already know, with it being, you know, what day is it? Thursday, and you're going to have things in there that you're gonna know, right? So if you've got, say, work meetings, or you're at work for a certain length of time, or you might be seeing friends or whatever, you're going to know when those are. Now, in terms of when you get up in the morning and then when you go to bed, you've obviously got the whole day. And what I want you to do with this task is plan that day, and then plan the pleasure and the purpose that you're going to glean from those things. And this does link to that example or the question that Christine has asked. And so you go through the day, and what you try to do is that when you have something purposeful, let's say job at the moment, you then next thing you plan to do something pleasurable. And this is about setting an intention, an understanding of what you can do prior to it happening. So rather than reacting in a scenario, so say for instance you go into a meeting and it doesn't work out the way you want, or all of a sudden there's a whole load of more work that comes in into a certain fashion. If you've already made a plan to respond in a certain way, it may not always work out like this, but the more you plan to do those things, the more consistent they will become, and you will then consistently be able to build more resilience into your general life. Rather than reacting, you're responding because you have a deeper knowledge of what brings you pleasure and what brings you purpose. And if you can, like I say, switch between those two things more deliberately, then that will build your resilience. It will give you more confidence that when things feel out of your control, then you have a overall control over your whole time. And I appreciate that this may seem like a lot of work, but as you practice, it actually can become quite a fluent thing in which you do prior to a day or the night before, which just gives you that level of confidence and resilience that actually helps you to then get better sleep or be present with people outside of your work environment, or even be present with people in your work environment over time. It doesn't take very long, but it does need some commitment to a small practice. So let's have a look. Hopefully you're getting through this and starting to see that and you're starting to see how it can impact your day-to-day life. Let's have a look. Just gonna So yeah, so once again, this I appreciate may take longer than the time that we have to fully complete this process, but like you will have access to the video, and I will, like I say, I'll send the worksheet over to Lewis so you guys can have access. and whilst you guys are still doing that, I may well. There's a question here which is about if you're in the workplace and you're someone who absorbs other people's emotions, you feel the stress of others, for example, and just want to help. How do you switch that off? Okay, so caring and being compassionate for other people is a beautiful thing, and I would encourage that behaviour in, well, pretty much everybody. I think that it can be damaging to an individual when it is affecting you negatively, and I think that there is a sort of a, it's, for want of a better word, you've got to put yourself first, because in that scenario you're increasing stress, or because of what's happening to somebody else is actually diminishing your ability to kind of respond your own way. And so my suggestion is that if you're feeling like that, then you really need to attend to your own needs, which in a workplace, like I say, if you look back at the examples of how I'm showing you to how to maintain a higher level of well-being for yourself and happiness, then those higher well-being and happiness scores for yourself actually builds more resilience, and that helps you to help others. So what is it that they need, and are you actually the answer to their issue? You know, if you can help, then help. But if it's not, and if it's a swirling a kind of opinion that may be going back and forwards, it may be that you're not the help required. And I think, obviously, once again, this is massively context based, but obviously if you're not necessarily the thing or person that can help, then encouraging them to find that, and you're then yourself, you do your own thing to maintain your own resilience. I mean, that's what I would suggest in terms of absorbing others' emotions. I do appreciate that some people are more in that category than others, and it can sometimes feel quite overwhelming. But if that is you, then what I would suggest is that focusing on yourself first is actually even more important. Because if you are someone that does genuinely have the ability to help others, if you can't help yourself first, then you're going to find yourself depleted pretty much all the time. Because what you'll find is those people will come to you. You may well have already found that, and then all of a sudden you're feeling overwhelmed because you don't have enough resources to help them. So I'd suggest that this actual practice will probably help you quite a lot, because what that then does is that you feel resilient in an environment where they need help, but because you're resilient, you can provide the help. Hopefully that makes some sense. It's difficult to have a two-way conversation. Maybe we could, if people want to at the end, Lewis, they could actually talk to me direct. Okay. That last, I'm going to say I've answered that one. And let me just skip through after this. Hopefully now that you've filled those two things in, and you can see where you were, and then you've got this day. Okay, so what you've created there, the second part of that is you should now have essentially a day which looks pretty good to you. You know, because you've got to choose, you know, from the list of things that we said earlier that bring you pleasure. So playlists, food, friends, all of those things, even in a work day, they're there. So you've got them, they should be on the list, but you've also got the other things that bring you purpose, that can be purposeful, like jobs. And if you might have a very bigger purpose job, that's even better. So you should now start to see how, you know, why aren't you aiming for higher numbers? You know what you want, and you can do that. You know, within the capacity you have, you can actually make those plans for yourself, set those intentions, and then attempt them and do them. So that tool is, I'm going to suggest you keep that one. If you struggle with this stuff, then keep that one by hand and make it a little bit of a practice to build that resilience going forward, to build that intention and build that confidence in yourself, that when things do feel that trigger, you're feeling that diminishing return, or you're feeling stressed in another place, you know that you've got these things to switch to, and you're not trying to make it up as you go. You already know, and then you can choose them. Okay, I'm just gonna click through. So, as a sort of a conclusion to the actual presentation, you know, I've written this short phrase, which I'll just read to you. And I'm not, and so yeah, I'll just read it. So it may come as no great surprise to anyone that we are happier when we pay attention to the good experiences and to the people that we like being with. But the problem is that we act as if we appear as if it's not obvious at all. So we don't pay attention to it. It's obvious, right? But you don't pay attention to it. And most people behave that way. With some of these simple tools that I've given you, you know, I'm just encouraging you to try a few more experiences that you like, buy a few less big things, switch between things that are pleasurable and purposeful for yourself. You know, make a little commitment to yourself to speak to people that you like to speak to each day. Spend a little bit less time glued to your phone or being scrolling through your Facebook, remembering that distractions are not your friend. And ultimately, hopefully, that will bring a small amount of happiness into your life. Any questions? I mean, I do have a question, which I'll go back to. As you heard at the beginning, I'm Steve. I do actually have, if you're a bit confused at the moment, like a lot of us are with the lockdown and things, in a close Facebook group, I'll be running a clarity series over the next 2 weeks where I'll be doing some lives and setting up questions where you can interact with the community and get clear on what you might like to do, even with all the confusion that's going on. And if you'd like to join that, it's free, so you're welcome to join. And you can, if you look me up on Facebook, there's information about that series on my page, or you can just email me and I'll send you the link. So yeah, that's the presentation. If you've got any questions, you stick them in the Q&A. I'm just going to go back to this question. Let me look here. Thanks, Matt. So, what would be the first steps when trying to reframe purpose away from achievement-driven and tangible results towards a more intrinsic, purposeful life? That's a big question. What I would say is that the society that we live in is very much about what you're saying there, achievement-driven. I mean, what, you know, your perception of achievement, I'm making an assumption here, is to do with your job, to do with what the world thinks of you and the ladder by which you've climbed, you know, the hierarchy and the space that you, how much money you earn, those type of things. Now, what I would say is that for you to start to understand what a purposeful life is, you're going to need to start to look inward to yourself, to what you actually find purposeful yourself. And when I work with people, one of the things that I love to do is encourage them to go back to what they like to do when they were young, but specifically what creative things they like to do. Because this does a couple of things, okay? Firstly, from a pleasurable perspective, it gives you the opportunity to do something pleasurable and not be distracted, because usually if you're painting or drawing or creating, then your focus of attention is right on it. But what it also does is enable you as an individual to become significantly more creative the more you do. And if you're struggling to kind of think, well, what is my purpose? What you're going to need is better problem solving abilities. What you're going to need is a more space and time to be creative with your own thoughts and what you might like to do. So my suggestion, and a couple of examples that I've had with a few coaching clients over the last couple of weeks are amazing. One of my clients used to love art. Now she's returned to that, and she's gone and started doing a load more art, and realised that actually maybe her activism might well be in the space of creating art which represents women. And she even took that a step further to set up an Etsy shop, and she's already sold some art. Okay, so she's still being an activist, just in a very much more creative way. Another example of how this worked with another client was that he used to love Warhammer. Completely different example. Loved Warhammer when he was younger, and he had some kits he's not painted. Over the process of working with him, now he's completely fall back into it. But the benefit of that is that he's now coming up with significantly creative and better ideas about what he might like to do and join up in his wider life. So now he's had some creative ideas about how he might like to take his technical abilities and build them into spaces where he can actually deploy them in events and things like that. All of that comes from you being more creative. So don't undervalue those things. And creativity obviously can be as simple as writing a short story. It's very easy when you think about it to spend 5 minutes doing something that's more creative if you allow yourself to see it that way. Okay, I think I've answered that question. And I'm gonna just have a last quick look. I'm very conscious that we need to finish. So thanks, guys. I appreciate your appreciation. And like I say, if you want to join up to my Clarity series, there'll be some fun stuff to do in there. So if you want to, get some of that creativity and maybe even find your purpose somewhat, you're welcome to join. It's a free series over the next couple of weeks, quite light touch, so no real demanding activity going on. But thank you so much. I really appreciate your attention and commitment to the session. I apologize about that alarm. Hopefully it wasn't too distracting. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Steve. It was a really good session.
No problems, friend.